Would say I hope everybody enjoyed their break, but I can tell everybody enjoyed their break because everybody was busy visiting with each other. That was good. Good to see that. Making some new friends, I hope, from those that are here visiting with us tonight. We're past the halfway mark. If you're thinking, oh boy, went an hour and 15 minutes on the first half, we're going to be really long. We're past the halfway mark, okay? It's all downhill from here, all right? As we talk about Babylon in the Bible. We got through a lot of material, and I appreciate y'all. Somebody made some comment about me putting everybody to sleep, and I can confidently say I have not even managed to put my grandson to sleep over there. So everybody's wide awake as we go through this. Babylon in the Bible. All right, so that was our break. I said we talk about this fella. He was on that list that we saw just before the break, Belshazzar. Belshazzar is, if we look at the kings of Babylon that are mentioned in the Bible, and there are several that are mentioned, Nebuchadnezzar is the most important. Belshazzar is the second most important of the kings who is mentioned in the Bible. He will also be the last king of Babylon. Sort of. Okay? There's a caveat there. We'll see that in just a second. In order to talk about Belshazzar, we've got to talk about Nabonidus. Nabonidus was his father. Nabonidus reigned from 555 to 539 BC, so that's what, about 16 years, if my math is right. He reigns about 16 years on the throne. Nabonidus is probably Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law by marriage to Nebuchadnezzar's daughter, whose name was Nitocris. So a son-in-law, not a son, that's going to be on the throne. Nabonidus is kind of interesting because he does this whole king thing in Babylon for 3 years. And then he says, you know what? There's an oasis out there in this place in Arabia called Taima. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to meditate, or just in general act strange. And that's what he does. Well, if you're king in Babylon, you've done your 3 years, now you're leaving, what are you going to do? Son of mine, have I got a job for you. You get to be, well, not really king, you get to be my representative in Babylon. So that's what he does. He goes off to Taima in Arabia, and he leaves his son Belshazzar to rule in his place. So this was pretty important, and Nabonidus wanted to make sure that everybody knew how this was going to work. And so we have another artifact that kind of sheds light on what's going on here. This is what's called the cylinder of Nabonidus. It again dates to this period. These kinds of cylinders are called foundation cylinders. This one is made out of clay. They were placed inside the walls of buildings as a record of a king's achievements. This particular cylinder describes the rebuilding of a ziggurat by Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon. He's technically king. Nabonidus here on this cylinder prays for his son Belshazzar, who ruled Babylon while he was away. That's in Daniel chapter 5, also in Daniel chapter 7 and 8. What's interesting about these clay cylinders is they're left in the walls, but then there was also very often versions of them that would have been in tablet form so that people could see that. So Nabonidus intended not only for the God he's addressing to hear these words, he was intending for people to hear these words as well. And so the inscription on this particular cylinder, partially, only part of it, says this: "As for me, Nabonidus, king of Babylon, save me from sinning against your great Godhead, and grant me as a present a life long of days. And as for Belshazzar, the eldest son, my offspring, instill reverence for your great Godhead in his heart, and may he not commit any cultic mistake. May he be sated with a life of plenitude." So Nabonidus says, not only am I concerned about myself, O God, that I'm addressing in this inscription, but I'm also concerned about Belshazzar. Be with him. So that takes us to Belshazzar. Belshazzar is the crown prince. He's not technically the king. He is co-regent, if you will, meaning he is co-king in Babylon, of the Babylonian Empire. That's going to be from 553 to 539 BC. The end of his reign is described in Daniel chapter 6. And so if you were following along in the Bible story, you get these earlier stories that are really all about Nebuchadnezzar. Then you get Daniel chapter 5, which is about Belshazzar. Then you get Daniel chapter 6, which is about the Persian Empire, which is not something that's a part of this lecture. In Daniel chapter 5, which we are now going to read, we see some interesting things about what's going on in Babylon. This is our last Bible reading, at least lengthy Bible reading of the evening. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of... Now, note, his father means ancestor here, okay? Nebuchadnezzar is ancestor of Belshazzar, not technically speaking, father. Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine, praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, again, notice reiterating over and over, who his ancestor is. It's Nebuchadnezzar. That's not a mistake, okay? Your father, the king, made him the chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not show the interpretation of the matter. But I have heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Let me just stop right there. If I were writing this story 300 years after the fact, I would probably have had Belshazzar say something like, You'll be second in the kingdom. Because maybe I don't know anything about Nabonidus who's out there in Arabia doing his own thing. Daniel did. Belshazzar offers Daniel the only thing he can. Third place. Can't offer him second, he's second. Can't offer him first, dad's first. Offers him third. Biblical accuracy. Verse 17. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let your gifts be for yourself and give your rewards to another. I'm not interested. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he killed, whom he would he kept alive, whom he would he raised up, and whom he would he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened so that he dealt proudly, there's our word again, pride, he was brought down from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast. And his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will. And you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart. Opposite of pride is humility. Though you knew all of this, but you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. You have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. Then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed, and this is the writing that is inscribed. Every time you hear someone say, I can see the writing on the wall, It is coming from Daniel chapter 5. And this is the writing that was inscribed. Mene, Tekel, and Parson. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck. He gets the rewards anyways. Proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Won't last very long. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Daniel chapter 5. This is the end of the reign of Belshazzar. Again, he only can offer him the third place in the kingdom because that's all he can offer. That's best. That night, the text tells us, Belshazzar is killed when the city falls to the Persians. Daniel himself gives very little detail about Babylon's fall. As a matter of fact, that's pretty much it, which we just read. He gives detail, though, about what leads up to it. And again, what word is it? It's pride. Belshazzar's pride. Belshazzar, who should have learned something from his ancestor Nebuchadnezzar, and he didn't. He's in the same sin as Nebuchadnezzar was. We do read in the chapter that a large feast was taking place for 1,000 of his lords. Herodotus, who is a Greek historian, describes the fall of the city in more detail. And this gets us back to what we talked about earlier with the river and Babylon. So, going back, this is a map. We haven't seen this map yet, but this is a map of the city of Babylon. Remember, you've got the Euphrates River that runs through the city. From it, then you have some moats or canals, if you will, that run around it. They're all a part of the defensive fortifications of the city. All along the waterfront, you then have these walls. And you can see that. Again, this is Casal's digital representation. It's really very, very good. So you see the defensive walls all along the riverfront. Back over here, you have the ziggurat that we talked about. There's the Ishtar Gate, the processional way. You've got the Euphrates River, you've got the moats. Everywhere you go, you've got walls on both sides. Your crossing points are bridges, but there's a gate there and there's a gate there. So effectively, it's like it's continually walled. Another image from Casal's is this one, just from a little bit different vantage point. There we have our ziggurat with the temple on top. All of these massive fortifications with just the bridges across the river Euphrates. You've got a boat here. The Euphrates is deep here at Babylon. It's not something that you can walk through. And so Belshazzar feels really, really secure in the city of Babylon. Probably for very good reason. So what does he do? He has a party for 1,000 of his nobles. Who are the officers in the Babylonian army? The nobles. Where are all the officers? They're all with Belshazzar. Where? Having a party. Getting drunk. Not getting drunk. They are completely drunk. That's very clear from the text. Herodotus tells us what happened. So I'm going to read a lengthy passage from Herodotus. He writes, when the Persians, who were posted by the city, saw the river Euphrates drop to about the level of mid-thigh for a man, they entered Babylon according to Cyrus's plan. What happened? The Persians go north of the city of Babylon, and they dam up the Euphrates. They divert it off to a low area where the water can just go. This is the weak point of Babylon. They take advantage of it. So now they've got Persian soldiers that are there watching, and when they see the water level go down, now we can do what? We can go up the riverbed. So when it gets to the level of mid-thigh for a man would be right about here. You can wade through that. What do? They entered Babylon according to Cyrus's plan. Now, if the Babylonians have been able to surmise what Cyrus was doing, They could have allowed the Persians to enter the city by the riverbed, and then they could have destroyed them utterly. For they could have locked up all the little gates leading to the river, and by climbing on the ramparts extending along the riverbanks would have caught the Persians there as if they had been so many fish in a barrel. So if you look at the image there in the picture, the Persians divert the river. It's low now. Men can wade through it. If the guards had been guarding all of this and had realized what was happening as the Persians came down the riverbed, they could have locked all these gates. And from the walls, they could have shot all those Persian soldiers, and the Persian soldiers would have been defenseless. Herodotus says, like so many fish in a barrel. But as it was, the Persian maneuver took them by surprise, because the city is so immense, its inhabitants say that when the Babylonians at the edges of the city were taken, those Babylonians who lived in the center were unaware of their capture, because they happened to be celebrating a festival at that moment. And so they sang and danced and enjoyed themselves until they found out all too well what had happened. This is how Babylon fell to the Persians. You can't make this stuff up. The most powerful, wealthy city of the ancient world. And all the officers are drunk. And the Persians march in, take the city. They capture the city, by and large, undestroyed. They put their own people on the throne. Daniel is made third in the kingdom. He's not interested in that. But as you read Daniel chapter 6, you find out the Persians say, hey, this Daniel, he's pretty smart. We're going to use him. And they do. He'll continue on to the Persian period. That's not a part of this lecture, so we can't talk about that. But we did when we talked about Persia and the Bible. Again, what's our word? It's pride. Pride causes God to strike Nebuchadnezzar with madness. Pride causes God to disperse the people at the Tower of Babel back in Genesis. Pride causes Belshazzar to fall as well. And God lets him know what's happening by giving him the handwriting on the wall. That's all the Old Testament. Then you get some things that happen. The Persians take over. Persian lecture was all about that. Eventually the Jews go back to captivity. We got about 400 years where the Bible is silent about the history. By and large, it's silent about the history. And then you get the New Testament. And you would think that at that point in time, Babylon's not important anymore, right? Except Babylon is. Because Babylon is a symbol of pride. I'm going to get y'all shouting that out before this evening is over, okay? We can do better than that. It's about pride, okay? And so in the New Testament, Babylon figures again in the book of Revelation. Babylon in Revelation is used as a symbolic name for the city of Rome. The city of Babylon itself at this time is insignificant. After Alexander the Great dies there, no one's interested in doing much with Babylon. There's still a settlement there, not very important, not the major city it had once been. But its inheritance that it passed on was pride. Okay, y'all didn't catch that clue there to say the word pride. And so now in the book of Revelation, we're not talking about Rome, we're talking about Babylon, but we're really talking about Rome. And it figures in prominently in the book. Revelation chapter 17 and 18. These two chapters, Revelation chapter 17 and 18, borrow heavily from Jeremiah chapter 50 and 51. Well, Jeremiah chapter 50 and 51 are two chapters that contain an oracle against Babylon. And to a lesser extent, it also takes material from Isaiah chapter 13 and 14 and also Zephaniah chapter 2 that are about Babylon. And it applies them to the city of Rome. And so we end up with a whole lot of really great artwork about Rome and about Babylon. And I love that picture. That particular picture, and I'm going to give you the history of this. This is called the Apocalypse Tapestry. It's found in the Chateau Angers in France. And it depicts the fall of Babylon, and specifically Babylon becoming a haunt for demons. Revelation chapter 18 and verse 2. This particular tapestry was woven between 1377 and 1382. And if you happen to be in France, in the Loire Valley, and I have never been there, but if you happen to be there, you can go to that chateau and you can see the tapestry. Not just that, the whole thing. It's multi-paneled, this depiction of the book of Revelation. And so here you have in the book of Revelation, those of you who are at Beach, you know I love to teach the book of Revelation. There is so much imagery there that's used. And the artist captures that in this tapestry. So you've got these demons that are there in Babylon, but it isn't Babylon, it's Rome as the city is being destroyed. Derek Kidner says this. He says in the Bible, the city increasingly came to symbolize the godless society. What city? Babylon. Babylon increasingly came to symbolize the godless society with its pretensions, Genesis 11, persecutions, Daniel chapter 3, pleasures, sins, and superstitions, Isaiah 47, its riches and eventual doom, Revelation 17 and 18. But it was her sins that, quote, reached unto heaven, Jeremiah 51:9, Revelation 18, verse 5. In Revelation, she is contrasted with the holy city, which comes down out of heaven, whose open gates unite the nations, Revelation chapter 21, verse 10, also verses 24 through 27. I would simplify, not negate any of those ideas, but I would simplify. I would say what Babylon represents in the Bible is pride. Good, we're getting there, okay? By the end of the night, we're going to get there, all right? Pride. Pride as it is manifested in all these different ways. Pride as the city of Rome wages war against the people of God and seeks to wipe them out. The message of Revelation is that ain't happening. It's Rome that's going to fall, like Babylon fell, like all world powers fall. The kingdom will last forever. And so we have some quotes, and I'm going to share these with you. They're all from the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 8, another angel, a second, followed, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. And then in Revelation chapter 16 and verse 9, the great city was split into three parts. The cities of the nations fell, and God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And then in Revelation chapter 17 and verse 5, and on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. Remember that image we started with this evening of the prostitute on the dragon. It's coming from here. Revelation chapter 18 and verse 2, and he called out with a mighty voice, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. And then in Revelation chapter 18 and verse 10, they will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And then in the same chapter, verse 21, then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. But it isn't Babylon. It's Rome. But Rome stands in the place that Babylon has occupied for centuries, ever since Genesis chapter 11. And all through the period where the Neo-Babylonian Empire is trouncing on God's people and persecuting God's people, and then Belshazzar dishonoring God by using God's things, his vessels taken from his temple, to honor pagan gods that do nothing, when it is God who holds I love Daniel's words. It is God who holds his breath in his hands, and that night takes it away. And so Rome now stands in that position. Rome is, in the book of Revelation, the one who inherits what Babylon had been. But the story doesn't end there. Because what I like about Babylon, I don't mean I like Babylon, what I like about thinking about Babylon is this lecture is Babylon in the Bible, right? But Babylon doesn't end with the Bible, because there's yet another chapter, and that concerns a fellow whose name was Hussein. Now, I'm going to give some information here because there are some younger folks that may not remember who this guy was. Saddam Hussein and Babylon. We remember this guy, right? He was a dictator of Iraq. He ruled there for a very long time. He was very, very brutal. He engaged in a war with his neighbor, Iran. It's called the Iran-Iraq War. And it went from 1980 to 1988. And it was a brutal war. Lots of Iranians died. Lots of Iraqis died in this war between these two countries. Saddam Hussein viewed himself as a successor of Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar. And if you kind of know a little bit about Saddam Hussein, that would almost seem laughable that he would think of himself as someone like Hammurabi and someone like Nebuchadnezzar, but he did. And so during this war, he began an ambitious program to rebuild Babylon. Because if I'm going to be the new Hammurabi, if I'm going to be the new Nebuchadnezzar, well, I've got to rebuild Babylon. And so that's what he starts to do. Remember the picture that we showed? We'll see that again in just a minute. The rebuilding of Babylon, that's him. But then we have this. Before we get to that picture, we have this. Now, I got to tell you, this is an image that I found on the internet, okay? It is attributed, where I found it, to Getty Images. Getty Images' website doesn't have it, but it is of a mural in Iraq. I don't know who to accredit it to, so if I'm violating copyright, somebody will let me know and I'll excise that part out of the video. But if you look at this, that is, of course, Saddam Hussein there on the left. And then you have Hammurabi's stelae that we saw earlier in this lecture. And then you got Hammurabi himself. It's not Nebuchadnezzar, it's Hammurabi. He looks just like that fellow right there. And they're gazing over the city of Babylon. And there you've got the Ishtar Gate and the processional way. And look and see how glorious I am. To earn my undying respect and affection. What, in one word, was Saddam Hussein's character flaw? Exactly. That caused him to invade Kuwait and run afoul of the international community, so that then not one war, but eventually two wars were waged against him. And he's found in a hole in the ground, not looking anything like that picture. He's handed over to his own people who hang him. Not at all like Nebuchadnezzar. Not at all like Hammurabi. But he thought of himself in that way. And so he rebuilds Babylon to show how great and powerful he is. So today, if you happen to find yourself in Iraq, I kind of think that that's going to be highly doubtful, but if you happen to find yourself in Iraq and you happen to go visit the ruins of Babylon, these are the ruins. Back over here is what Saddam Hussein tried to rebuild before his pride caught up with him. Babylon in the Bible. Thank you very much for your attention this evening. I'm going to talk about a couple of things before we kind of wrap up the lecture. I'm thinking that maybe there are going to be some questions. If not, then there won't be. But just a couple of things to share with you all. Two things coming up. Well, one thing coming up, one thing a little bit farther out in the future. We have a congregational singing here Friday, November the 10th, starting at 7 and goes to 8:30. Okay? You will have zero, I don't know why it's doing that, but I wish it would quit. You will have zero problem staying awake during that singing, okay? Pretend it didn't do that. There's an automatic, I don't know, there's an automatic something going on in there, and it's just going, or somebody's playing with it back there, and I don't think they are. Congregational singing, November the 10th. We've got some excellent song leaders here. And on that evening, we will probably fill this room. Probably all these seats are going to be filled, okay? And people are going to sing for an hour and a half. It is fantastic. And so if you got a chance in a couple of weeks on a Friday, it's like less than 2 weeks, it's minus 1 day. Come back Friday night, you'll be welcome as we spend about an hour and a half in praise. It's congregational singing. We all get to sing. It's a great evening to look forward to. Mark it on your calendars. Again, November the 10th. That's in about 2 weeks. Then, if you'd like, you can mark your calendars for March the 23rd of next year. March the 23rd, that's a Saturday night like tonight from 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to do a lecture like this as well and talk about archaeology and the Bible. There are some incredible archaeological findings that shed light on things we find in the Bible. We're going to spend a couple of hours talking about those together. So I hope you'll mark your calendar for both of those things. Make plans to come here if you can. I will also say this. If you take one of the cards for that lecture on your way out this evening, on the back of it are some QR codes. One of those QR codes will take you to our Facebook page. If you like that Facebook page, click like on it, okay? If you like the Facebook page, you will hear about everything we've got coming up. Our lectures, our singings, our sermons, everything that's going on. So I highly recommend Facebook page is one of the ways we communicate with the community around us. All right, thank you all very much. I'm going to give one last chance to see if there's some questions or comments. Caleb is there. He's got his mic. He hadn't gotten any work in tonight. Here we go, over here to Rusty.
Just wondering, is there any information anywhere in regards to Nebuchadnezzar's death? Any information on that? Yes, he dies of old age. Okay. He dies of old age or sickness. He does not die in battle. He is not assassinated, okay? That's a testimony to him as a king that he does die a natural death. Yeah, we know something about his death. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Belshazzar, of course, dies how? The Persians kill him. Okay, so up here, we're going to get you a mic and then we'll all hear you. There you go.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering about the Ishtar Gate. It's out of blue stone. Mm-hmm. What is the stone that is blue?
He calls it blue stone, but if I'm not mistaken, it is glazed stone that's been glazed with a blue glaze on it. Okay. And if I can't go back quickly to those pictures, but if you see where it's reconstructed, you get some that are original and some that they've had to make modern reproductions of those stones.
There's a stone called lapis lazuli.
Correct.
I didn't know if it might be that.
They are not. My understanding is that they are glazed with a blue glaze to give them that.
Okay, I'd love to see it. It looked beautiful.
He calls them blue stones, but I don't think it's lapis lazuli. And I will tell you that there are a few moments in my life where I have been truly in awe. One of those was when I went to the Grand Canyon. One of those was when I went to the Lincoln Memorial. One of those was in the museum in Berlin. Seeing the Ishtar Gate. Now, when Daniel is carried off to the city of Babylon, Ishtar Gate hadn't been built yet. But it is built while he is alive in Babylon. Daniel probably walked through that gate. I suspect Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked through that gate as they went about their business in the city of Babylon. It's impressive. And not only is that impressive, but there's also something else in that museum. It's the Pergamum altar. The altar of Zeus from Pergamum, which is in modern Turkey. Germans excavated that as well, carried off a bunch of that to Europe, and reconstructed it partially in the museum. That's an impressive thing to see as well. Not everyone can get to Israel. Not everyone can get to the Middle East to see some of the sites there. But there are some fantastic museums. The British Museum in London, I have not been there yet. The Louvre in Paris, not been there yet. The museums in Berlin, I've been able to be there. that just have fantastic collections. But we've got some museums here in the States that have some fantastic collections as well. The Harvard Museum in Massachusetts has some really neat stuff. There's a museum in Chicago that has some really neat stuff as well. And some museums in New York have a lot of artifacts, but it's incredible to see. Highly recommend, if you ever get a chance to go to Berlin, to go see it. But just before you buy your tickets, make sure they're open. Long way to go to find a closed sign on the door. Yes, sir.
If I'm not mistaken, when Nebuchadnezzar went crazy, doesn't the Bible record that he went out in the wilderness for a certain period of time? Is there any secular verification of that?
There is not. There is nothing in the Chronicles that talk about that in Nebuchadnezzar's case, but in all honesty, wouldn't necessarily expect there to be, because he goes crazy, but then the madness passes, he's back on the throne. I would suspect that if anybody had been writing about that, probably Nebuchadnezzar said, we need to kind of get that out of the record. Okay. Daniel gives us that record, and interestingly enough, the illness that he describes is actually a psychological illness that is attested to in modern psychology. It's called boanthropy. In that particular case, it's thinking you are a cow, a bovine, okay? But there are some other versions as well that it's actually an affliction that people have. Good question. Any other questions or comments? Okay, one over here. Yes, sir. We'll get our mic to you.
After Nebuchadnezzar was relieved of his insanity, the scripture records that he made this wonderful proclamation in praise of the God of Israel. My question to you is, do you think that he was actually a convert at that point?
At that point, probably. Did it stick? No.
Okay.
At that point, I mean, it's hard to read the chapter in Daniel and not conclude that he was really sincere in what he's saying. But a lot of these kings will praise the God of the Bible, but at the same time they're worshiping whoever else they're worshiping, and it's not necessarily very long-lived. There isn't any indication that he establishes the worship of Jehovah or the God of the Bible as the exclusive worship. Certainly as king he could have done that. He could have gotten rid of the temples, the other temples that are there in the city. No indication at all that he made even the attempt to do that. But it is a chapter that has very high praise for God. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, it's almost 8 o'clock, but not quite. So I'm going to let you go early. And I can honestly say I'll let you go early, okay? Please drive careful going home. That rain is coming our way. Be safe on the roads. Hope that I'll get to see you all again in the future. The singing, the lecture. We have worship here every Sunday. Love to have some of y'all come visit with us if you are inclined to do so. If you've got some questions that you'd like to talk to me about, you can send me a message on Facebook. You can let me know this evening, and we'll make the arrangements to talk about those questions. Thank you all very much. Appreciate you being here. Have a good evening.